Welcome to Systems Engineering Leadership Week 2. I'd like to start this week's video off with 4 reminders. These reminders were mentioned in the introductory course video for the class, and they were reinforced from last week's lecture. The first one is that the goal of each lecture is to augment the book and build off of key elements from the readings. Second reminder is that the materials build upon the Management 501 and 502 class that you've already had. The third reminder is that all of the lectures are designed to be practical, but they are built on solid theoretical foundations. And the fourth and final reminder is I really want to challenge you to think out of the box and question some of your own assumptions. In the next slides, we will give you some information in order to help you do that better. So let's begin. First, we introduced last week the course objectives. For this week, we're going to talk about the 4 objectives here about essential properties for leadership, different approaches. We'll talk about personal leadership models, and then we'll start beginning to get into team motivation and models. This will be just the first introductory piece. For this week, specifically, we'll show you information on behavioral styles and their connection to leadership. We'll talk about task and relationship for managers and leaders. I'll show you a chart on different leadership taxonomies. We'll briefly discuss personal mastery and drive, which is one of the video lectures. And then we'll end with next steps. As you remember, we introduced the leadership commandments based on some work done at Harvard. This week, once again, we will focus on the first commandment about knowing thyself. As mentioned previously, we're going to use the ATOM model, and this week also is focused on analyzing. So understanding your current environment for yourself and how does that apply with your leadership within your own organization. First, let's talk about the first topic of behavioral styles. So why should you be concerned with behavioral styles? Well, first of all, we want to move you through the different phases of behavior and move you from a judging style to more of an understanding. And once you have that foundation, you can move from understanding to respecting the different behavioral styles. From respecting, we expect that you'd have an appreciation for these behavioral styles. And finally, you'll move from where we started, which was judging, to valuing the behavioral styles. Different behaviors that you see in the workforce and the workplace that currently may drive you crazy, to give you an understanding of their value and truly understand the value of bringing different behavioral styles together for a more cohesive team and a better product. Now, if you look at behavioral assessments, there's really 2 types of behavioral assessments. The first one is Myers-Briggs, as probably more commonly known as MBTI, and this is based on a book that was written in 1921 called Psychological Types by Carl Gustav Jung, pronounced Jung. And in addition, there's several instruments that have been derived from the work that was originally done by Carl Jung. One is the Kersey Temperaments by David Kersey, and the Big 5 by McRae and Costa. The second type of behavioral assessment is one that's more commonly known as DISC, And the 4 elements stand for dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. So it is not an acronym, it just stands for those 4 descriptors. And this assessment is based on a book called Emotions of Normal People, which was written in 1943 by a Harvard-educated gentleman, professor by the name of William Moulton Marston. For this class, we will use the DISC assessment. Either of these could be used to understand personality, but we will use the DISC assessment, which you'll find a link at the end of this lecture so that you can go and determine and get your own assessment for us to discuss in week 3. First of all, let's talk about DISC and what it means. There are 4 styles, as I mentioned earlier. The first is the dominant style. The second is the influencer. The third is the supportive style or steadiness. And the fourth is conscientiousness, or also known as calculating. Now, each of these styles have 2 different variables that define them. First, the D and I work at a faster pace. They like to get different things done, but they like to get it done quickly, and if there are issues, they will fix them later. Those are D and I type of styles. Conversely, on the other side, we have CNS styles. These individuals like to work at what is known as a deliberate pace. Some will call it a slow pace, but it's much more a deliberate pace, where they want the specific time in order to do it right. Now, if you look at the C and the D styles, these individuals have a tendency to be more task focused. So that's important to them. And if you look at the S and the I, these are more people focused. Now, if I want to look at a specific style, let's take the D for example. What that individual will be is they will be task focused and like to work at a faster pace. Conversely, someone that is an I style also likes to work at the faster pace. However, their focus, things that are important to them, that helps them make decisions, are more of a people focus than a task focus. Now, as we go to the next slide, one of the things that you should understand is that we are not one style. We are a blend of all 4 styles. However, people see the most intense factor first. One of the things that we have learned is that the more styles and combinations that a team has, the more likely they are to be successful. Now, there are some specifics about this, that depending on where the team is with regard to its maturity and the tasks that they have, having more of one style versus another may be an advantage. That's for a discussion at a different time. On your report, you will see a natural style, which is the circle, and a star, which is your adapted style, which means this is how you work or how you adapt in the workplace. To let you know, there are 364 different reports, and to show the statistical validity, DISC has been normed recently on 120,000 people. The only assessment that has been normed at a higher level is the SATs. If we look at the natural style, this is who we are. This is who we're born and bred. And during difficult times, this will be the style that will be the most apparent to individuals. The star, conversely, is how we've adapted at work. And the key is, the closer we can get the star and the dot together, the less stress there is for us in the workplace, because it allows us to be more of who we are naturally. Now, one of the things that I felt might be interesting and useful, in particular in this class, would be to show you some research that's been done around social compatibility. This is putting the different styles together and what you should expect from them. For example, if I was to choose two people that had very high I tendencies, the expectation would be is that the ease of interaction with these people, between these people, will be extremely high, very low conflict. However, on the other end of the scale, if I was to put a dominant and a conscientious person together, the level of social compatibility, potential conflicts that might exist for these type of styles, may be significantly higher. Information just provided to you so that you can start looking around your workplace and people that you work with to see if the styles have some synergy or some conflict. Now, moving from social compatibility to work output, what if we put these styles together? Now, you remember we started the social compatibility putting the two I's together. Although they're highly compatible, one of the things that has been found from the research is that productivity for these two styles when working together will be extremely low. However, they may be highly socially compatible, but the expectation where you'd have to provide additional monitoring in order to ensure work output may be necessary. If you were putting pairs of people together or teams together, putting D's and S's together has been found to be one of the highest productivity environments. Something to consider for you in the workplace. Now, the second portion of this lecture was to talk about behavioral styles and how do they link to leadership. We were fortunate enough, myself and Dr. Ali Lakhani, Murtuza Ali Lakhani, were fortunate enough to receive a research grant back in 2008 to actually statistically look to see if there was any linkage between cross-cultural leadership, behavioral styles, values, and task preferences in order to identify and sustain organizational change, which is what leadership is all about. For this lecture, we'll strictly focus on the cultural leadership and the behavioral styles. I encourage you, if you'd like to see the full presentation as well as listen to the presentation delivered at CSTD, the Canadian Society for Training and Development, is you can go to this URL, the http blog.magnaleadership.com, for you to see the entire presentation as well as hear us deliver it. One of the elements of results for the first research question that we looked at, there were many, that is the most applicable for this lecture, is what is the relationship between leadership and individual behavioral styles? And what we found was that any of the areas where you see the X, that there was no correlation or an insignificant correlation between the four styles, D, I, S, or C, as you can see here as an example. We did a Spearman correlation for each of these, as well as showing you the degree of confidence. Obviously, a degree of confidence P of less than 0.01 is a little bit more significant than one that is a P value of 0.05. However, both using SPSS are showing as statistically significant. So is there a relationship between behavior and leadership? These were our findings. The conclusions we drew based on this information was that the higher level of D-type behavior that you see in yourself as well as in others, these styles, D styles, remember, high task, working at a very fast pace, are associated with higher levels of leadership capacities, of organizational performance. This is building and sustaining individuals within an organization, keeping them motivated, engaged, and business results. That was the first conclusion. The second conclusion was that higher levels of I behaviors, these are the influencer behaviors, were only associated with higher leadership capacities. They are still viewed as leaders. However, seeing any relationship with organizational performance, stability, or business results was missing. The third conclusion was, if you're looking at the S behavioral styles, these were associated actually with lower levels of leadership capacity. This is perceptual, that people that have S styles, these are the steady people. They're working at a more deliberate pace and they're focused more on people than tasks. Actually, we'll show you as an example here a negative correlation with leadership and org performance, but no relationship to or anything significant to business results. And the final conclusion is that higher levels of C behavioral styles were associated with lower levels of leadership capacity, lower levels of org performance, and lower business results. This was a little bit surprising. Now, however, the R values, as you can see here, are relatively low. The closer it is to 1, the stronger the relationship. However, these are all statistically significant. So let's do a quick summary of the behavioral piece. First, the recommendation is spend your energy moving towards your natural style whenever possible. So look at what you're doing in the workplace. The closer you can get to your natural style, the better chance you have to be motivated, engaged, and less stressed. The second thing is use your knowledge and tools to identify other styles and then help them to adapt so you can build to your stronger relationships. The more you can adapt to their styles and help them speak in their language, is it task, is it relationship, is it fast, is it slow, the better leadership you will be viewed as having. The third is you need to move and be a role model, and the goal is to move from judging to valuing. I mean, this is true leadership, both in your personal and your professional relationships. Okay, and the last thing that we will implore upon you is don't use DISC as an excuse for being difficult or overly self-critical. You don't want to say, well, this is who I am, live with it. This is designed to give you some self-reflection. In the Adam model, this is the analysis. In the Harvard model, this is understanding thyself first. And that's the purpose of behavioral assessments, is for that understanding. Okay. The third item for this week is we're talking about task and relationship. This is achieving balance. So why is it so important for a manager to achieve this kind of balance? What we found is that leaders that have the ability to work on this continuum where they can focus on task, which is the results, the indicators, doing work yourself or directing the work, as well as relationship, which would be helping others or coaching, building teams, gaining participation, resolving conflict, may not be directly related to immediate output, but long-term has a great advantage. Having the flexibility to float between these, so we're not saying that a 50-50 split is what you need. What we found is that great managers and great leaders know how to dynamically balance task and relationship for their individual team members. So they work on things situationally. The fourth item we're going to discuss briefly is leadership taxonomies. Different approaches to leadership. As you've seen in the book by Gary Yuckel, Leadership in Organization, as well as some of the things that you're reading about in the Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge, there's many different approaches we touched upon last week for leadership. What we did, myself and my business partner, Dr. Ali Lakhani, who's also another professor, we looked at 10 different leadership models. We looked at Zenger and Folkman, Jim Collins, Peter Block, Warren Bennis, Daniel Goleman, Conger, House, Cotter, Elliot Jacques, and Bernard Bass. Okay, these are probably the more common or the most common and well-researched models that are out there. And what we did is we wanted to create a comparative taxonomy of where the different focuses were. Overall, we found that communication and vision were foundations for all leadership models. So no matter what model you use, any model is going to have those two critical elements. However, what we found was that many of the other models focused on different elements, such as authenticity, stewardship, creativity, confidence, reinforcement, empowerment, competence, organizational culture, and national culture. And we'll talk about national culture is where your country of origin or your family is from. The one thing that we found is that, as you can see in the blue areas, there are many gaps that the different models focus upon or don't focus upon. One of the things that we found that was a gap in all of them was that although leadership is defined, organizational performance, this is attracting people and retaining the best, was one of the areas that was not a focus and of concern for us. However, there was at least one, the Zenger and Folkman model, that did focus on business results, creating leadership that had a results orientation. Dr. Murtuza Ali Lakhani in 2005 completed his research, his doctoral research. He had created a model which he talks about as Caliber that would complete all of these and include all of these leadership dimensions and output to fill the gaps. So there's some additional information available if you'd like to read up on that. Okay. As a final element, once again, this is also in the video lecture that you'll see this week, is I want to talk about the book by Daniel Pink called Drive. And what Pink talks about in his very short lecture, the video lecture, as well as in the book, he talks about 3 elements that motivate us. And once again, putting a leadership spin on this. He said that in order to stay motivated and engaged, you need to have autonomy. This is independence or freedom. A second element, you need to have mastery. This is being able to develop expert skill or knowledge. And the third is you need to have purpose or a reason for contributing. These 3 elements, as a leader, if you can create these elements or an environment that allows all 3 of these, or at least 1 or 2 of these to happen, you will have the ability to raise your stature as a leader. In addition, since this week we're focusing on knowing thyself and doing our upfront analysis, you should look at your work environment to see how well it contributes to creating these three elements, and does that keep you motivated? So what are the next steps for this week? We ask you to complete the online DISC Motivators Assessment at this link. It will be active until the end of the week. Complete this week's articles and reading from the textbooks. Please participate in this week's discussions, and as mentioned previously, begin preparing your final notes for your final assignment.